Hi, I have a question about like invasive species in general. So we talked about like invasive species that enter the environment and like are more adaptive, like have an adaptive advantage in that environment because they're maybe more like rigid. I don't know how to describe it, like more hardy. But say just hypothetically, species comes in and doesn't really have an adaptive advantage. I'm trying to figure out maybe like a fish, they call it a goby in freshwater rivers upstate near where I live in Syracuse. And they are an invasive species and they do cover and they eat a lot of other eggs from fish nests, but I don't know how much of an impact they have. Like if it's greater than other fish or if they've caused an extinction of like another species. So I was just wondering like maybe auxiliary effects of like an invasive species.
So auxiliary effects of invasive species. That's a interesting question. So I think we have to answer that question first with what it means to be invasive. You can have, there are different categories. So they are non-native species that get in, but they have to establish. Once they establish, then the next step is that they have to have a negative effect. Once they have a negative effect, then they would be called invasive. And then at that point, we make a decision on economically, what can we do? What are the costs and benefits of removing this invasive species, and does it really outweigh the effect that it's having? And actually, what's interesting is some people are finding that the best option is to do nothing. Eventually, things come around, and if an invasive species is competitive, I mean, these native species also have the opportunity to compete again. So if we actually are just patient, perhaps it works itself out. But tell that to, I don't know, an industry worker or a farmer that really his livelihood, her livelihood depends on that resource. So patience may not always be the best, even if it's an auxiliary effect.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate like the economic standpoint, like the way of looking at it, how nature will likely return to homeostasis, or I guess like regulate itself over time because of the amount of factors involved. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
No problem.
I have a quick question, kind of related to what you're talking about, like how man-made impacts affect the natural environment, and kind of like how to sort of maintain that balance of like human impact and also that kind of pristine ecology. And I'm kind of curious, like what are some of those big stakes, like those ecological or environmental stakes that these types of research and toxicology reports can kind of mitigate, and like what are potential solutions? So what are the main, fears or consequences of invasive species or these high levels of salt in the water? And then what are potential solutions? Like, I don't know if there's a different type of salt or different type of road treatment that can be used. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's a good question. So we'll start with road salts, and I'll talk a little bit about what are the issues. So obviously, if we don't have road salt in the winter, that really affects productivity. People can't drive to work, things like that. But on the other end, if we have this salt contamination, we lose biodiversity, we lose the function of wetlands. Wetlands protect us from a variety of different things. So there's also economic issues there. Now, you can also then think about different solutions, right? So one solution to using road salts would be to use beet juice. So beet juice can also be useful, but the thing is, like, it requires somebody to innovate. It requires somebody to figure out how to make it as effective as salt without, and also understanding that it may not be toxic, but there is no incentive. Until there is an incentive to innovate, it's likely not going to happen. Now, there's something that you guys may or may not be familiar with. Fracking is illegal in New York. But what is legal is we can take fracking brine, the toxic radioactive crap that comes out of fracking wells, and we can spread it on our roads. And that radioactive contaminant can leach into aquatic systems, but it's not regulated because it is considered road salt. So there are other alternatives, some potentially better than others, but it's also really challenging for regulation or regulating agencies to figure out which is which and what to do and what is better and is it better.